What inspired you to write the book, and what did you want to cover by doing it?
So this book really evolved. I mean, it's not as though I had a conception of the book and then I sat down to write it. Occasionally, that also happens, that you start out knowing exactly what kind of book you want to write. You know, the India, the Emerging Giant, I had a sense of where I wanted to take it. After that, the other books also, generally I had a reasonable sense. But this one was totally unplanned.
You already laid out a little bit of how Nehru came to socialism. I found it very interesting that he had these socialist ideas, but it was growth and production and modernity that sort of inspired him and was perhaps the central objective that he was seeking. But somewhere this misunderstanding about how it is to be achieved or what it actually is about. And you laid that out very beautifully. Would you sort of help people go through it?
So Nehru's ideas had begun to form already on the how he saw the evolution after independence, probably in the 1930s. But still, this radicalism in his socialism that remains.
Right.
And the last evidence of it we see is in the 1936 presidential address that he gave in Lucknow, and there you can see, on display very graphically his continued belief in this radical socialism. There is this dramatic statistic that P.T. Bauer gives in his 1960 critique of the Second Five-Year Plan, that the development expenditure on elementary education in the Second Five-Year Plan was just half of the investment made in one of the three steel mills.
Unbelievable.
There is
for the entire
one
country.
half of the for the entire country. Ms. Gandhi herself was actually a hardcore socialist. I mean, if you look at past history, didn't speak very much till very late. Even in her early years as a prime minister, she didn't speak a lot. So, but her ideas were certainly formed. She was president of the Congress Party during Nehru's time. I think 1959, somewhere there. She was also, mentoring all these socialists. There was this socialist forum within the Congress Party, and they looked up to her. When we say that Nehruvian economics or Nehruvian whatever, there is nothing Nehruvian or there is nothing Gandhian. These people were constantly evolving. They would change their minds. So it's not like it's the same. The Nehru of 1945 was not the Nehru of 1960.
Right. Sir, very exciting moment for me because you were the first guest that we ever had on the podcast, and you are the first person we are ever having again on the podcast. So very very happy to have you back. And this time we want to discuss your new book, which I've been through, and I must say the size completely belies how easy it is to get through. It looks very daunting when you see it.
Yes.
But I got through it in just a few hours and non-stop reading.
You must read fast.
No, but it is non-stop reading. It's easy reading. It's very well written as usual. So please tell us what inspired you to write the book. I know part of the story was not happy, but I think still an incredible addition to scholarship on India. So what inspired you to write the book, and what did you want to cover by doing it?
So this book really evolved. I mean, it's not as though I had a conception of the book and then I sat down to write it. Occasionally, that also happens, that you start out knowing exactly what kind of book you want to write. The India, the Emerging Giant, I had a sense of where I wanted to take it. After that, the other books also, generally I had a reasonable sense. But this one was totally unplanned. and as I mentioned in the preface to the book, this was a period during which my dear brother got infected by COVID and then eventually became very sick and spent about 45 days in the hospital and in the end didn't make it. So he and I had a really very, very close relationship because only 2 years older than me. We grew up together. So during that period, I just couldn't focus on almost anything.
Right.
So I started reading something about Nehru's speeches and Nehru's biography and some of the other biographies also I read during that period. Abdul Kalam, Maulana Azad comes to mind. There was probably a couple others. And as I read that, I began to make discoveries. And the first one really was that we all had grown up reading that Nehru had been a Fabian socialist ever since his days at Cambridge University and then later on at London School. He wasn't at London School, but he went there while studying law at Inner Temple in London. So that was the impression everyone had. And,
including me, I might add, until recently, yes.
Yeah. And then from his biography by Sarpalli Gopal, who is really the definitive biographer of Nehru, I began to learn that was really not the case. That actually, when at Cambridge, he had been attracted to a different figure, William Morris, who was a textile designer and was much more of a radical socialist. But even then, I think he perhaps was attracted to Morris and Morris's books, different volumes as they were coming out. He bought a whole set of those. This is from Gopal's biography of Nehru. But even Gopal says that there was no real conviction there then. Even George Bernard Shaw, who was a Fabian, came to speak at Cambridge. But so anyway, this whole gradually I discovered that Nehru really became a committed socialist more in the late 1920s when he returned to UK or returned to Europe. Really, Kamala Nehru, his wife, had become ill, and he took her to Switzerland for treatment. And then during that period, there was a big congress of all the socialists and the nationalist leaders from developing countries, both in Asia and Africa. And this was really a very, very big affair. And Nehru represented India there, really represented the Congress and through Congress India at the conference. And that's where, and then when he returned, actually, he also went for a brief period to Russia, Moscow. And that also, I think, visit to Russia, the ex-Soviet Union, impressed him very much. And so when he comes back, Sarpalli Gopal describes him describes this or describes him as having returned as a kind of revolutionary or some sort. That's
and you quote some of the speeches.
Yes.
Actually,
and then then you look. Then I come to some of his speeches. The speeches that he gave immediately after returning to India, were very much laced with radical socialist rhetoric. Number of these speeches, and then he also influences eventually the Karachi resolution of the Congress or AICC, where a lot of these socialist ideas then enter actually. So that's really the beginning. The seeds of India's socialism get sown in that resolution.
That's so interesting. So that's where the idea of the book formed for you, and that's where the book started.
Still not actually. So I thought that there was an interesting article to be written.
Right.
And first I really wrote it out as an article. And as usual, I sort of tried it on. I mean, I didn't know what's the worth or value of it is really. You don't know. It's not an area in which I work. So I mean, there's more like history of thought kind of analysis. So I had Praveen Krishna read, and he thought it was very, very interesting. And then I think I also went back to the Discovery of India, which I had read off and on in different parts and all. And then big things began to fall in place. Still, I wrote a second piece, basically laying out, which is now the second chapter in the book. Still not sure that this was a book or something. Once those two had happened, then I think somewhere the idea came that one could write this into a book. But even then, I thought it will be something only about Nehru era. But as I wrote more, I began to connect that here, the influence is not ending with Nehru.
That's right.
And even though we knew that socialism is a part of everybody's thinking in India, and in one way or the other it influences, I had not connected that there was in terms of the change, why it took so long, and why ultimately it happened in 1991, and how the minds of different players along the way, from Indira Gandhi to Morarji Desai to Rajiv Gandhi, and then ultimately coming to Narasimha Rao, how their minds worked and all that connection was slow. So once I said, okay, we pull it all together, and then the book became in 3 parts. The first one about the largely the history of thought during Nehru's period, Nehru's own thought, and of the contemporary economists. That became the part 1. Part 2 became the how he executed that into a whole economic model, from different policies to bureaucratic machinery to then what kind of economic outcomes it led to, and then the third part is about continuing impact of socialism.
And so and maybe I think that's a great order in which to go to discover the book also. In that first part, I found it very interesting. You already laid out a little bit of how Nehru came to socialism. I found it very interesting that he had these socialist ideas, but it was growth and production and modernity that sort of inspired him and was perhaps the central objective that he was seeking. But somewhere this misunderstanding about how it is to be achieved or what it actually is about, and you laid that out very beautifully. So would you sort of help people go through it?
Nehru's ideas had begun to form already on the how he saw the evolution after independence, probably in the 1930s. But still, this radicalism in his socialism that remains.
Right.
And the last evidence of it we see is in the 1936 presidential address that he gave in Lucknow, and there you can see, on display very, very graphically his continued belief in this radical socialism, that you can't really change the things, and you I mean, that speech really spooked a lot of the industrialists.
Right.
And they got very worried that, after independence, Nehru is going to nationalize everything and there will be no space left for the industrialists. And so they tried to do a bit of a pushback, and
that's how he moderated a little bit.
Yes. No, so that's immediately after that speech. And the industrialists then also got advice that work through Gandhi, and because, he's not keen on socialism. he didn't believe in any of that. I mean, he had a very different conception, that the India lives in villages, we have to promote cottage industries, and that, so he's much more kind of rural development kind of oriented leader. Nehru was in contrast, was very industrialized. I think that's the only way to go, etc.
Right.
So there's a clear tension between the two on those matters. But at the same time, there's also a great deal of understanding between the two leaders, and so Gandhi gave full space to Nehru. There is no doubt. So now, what happened here was that 1938, Subhash Chandra Bose is the
That's right.
president of the Congress Party, and he appoints this National Planning Committee. He creates this National Planning Committee, and then asks Nehru to chair it.
Exactly.
And,
which initially he was not willing to do or something like that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It was probably, it's very likely that he was playing hard to get because, clearly there was this tension between Subhash Bose and Nehru also.
Yeah.
So it's possible, but actually, so Subhash Bose got Rabindranath Tagore to write to Nehru that you should do it.
Oh, so interesting. I missed that. But yeah.
So I don't know whether actually I included that reference in the book.
Maybe not, because you do cite that Nehru takes it very grudgingly almost, right? The chairmanship,
yes.
Which is interesting given that this is what he wanted to do.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because he himself then writes that it was a natural thing for me to do.
Yeah.
So, so this is where I think the ideas begin to become a bit more concrete, because what happens is in the National Planning Committee, there are representatives of industry, then there are scientists, there are economists, political leaders, and so it's a very kind of multidisciplinary kind of committee. But principally here, Nehru has to confront the industrialists. Industrialists feel that Nehru will really nationalize everything and therefore do the pushback. And Nehru kind of really does his pushback and all. And so there are some references. Now, we don't, unfortunately, I was writing this from New York, so while I was able to access many original sources, I couldn't access they probably in the Nehru library here, the proceedings of the various committees. Right. Final report of the National Planning Committee never got written.
Right.
Actually, Gandhi put a stop to that thing.
Really interesting.
And he didn't let them publish anything out of it either.
Right.
But a lot of the committees had completed their work. The many committees had been appointed, they had completed their work. So those probably exist in the files, and for somebody young, I think it's a good area of research, just do some archival research at the Nehru Library. But some basic stuff gets reported by Nehru himself in the Discovery of India.
Right.
And there he says that, there we came face to face with the industrialists, and we both learned in the process and all, and while we didn't agree on everything, we still, try to be accommodative, etc. and all. And the next thing you find actually is that, you come 1946, around that, Nehru becomes the Prime Minister of the interim government also, right? So, when these discussions begin to happen in the Parliament and during the Constituent Committee meetings, etc., you suddenly find Nehru actually pushing back against the socialists, because socialists want, for socialists, he's not, and there is also Sardar Patel somewhere in the background, you don't, I don't see him present, but if one connects the speeches that Sardar Patel was giving between 1948 and 1952 to what ultimately came in the Industrial Policy Resolution, one begins to see that probably Patel had some influence on that Industrial Policy Resolution, because Patel throughout these 2 or 3 years gives speeches saying that, look, don't fear nationalization. What are we going to nationalize? First, you have to have the industry to nationalize it. So he tries to reassure the private industrialists there, and that actually it gets written into the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948 that for 10 years there will be no nationalization.
Right.
And that, of course, included also any foreign companies also. Foreign companies
Right.
also got reassured that they will not get nationalized for 10 years.
Which they went back on later, right?
So later, 1956, then when the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956 comes,
Right.
Patel is gone.
Right.
And all the conservatives have been fully defeated.
Right.
Because Purushottam Das Tandon in the immediately after the death of Patel. Patel died in December 1950. And soon after, conservatives are still wielding power. And Purushottam Das Tandon is the leader and he becomes the president of the Congress party and all. But it doesn't take Nehru more than 6 to 8 months to basically peg them out. Purushottam Das Tandon is basically forced to resign as the Congress president and so forth. So, but this is where National Planning Committee, which deliberated from 1938 to 1940, those are the deliberations which I think led to both sides to compromise.
Right.
Industrialists felt that they had to recognize and accommodate Nehru's socialism, and Nehru recognized that he had to carry the industrialists with him.
Right.
Because Nehru realized that production was supreme, meaning growth really was supreme, and without that he really couldn't get development, and for that these industrialists were necessary.
Right.
He just couldn't, the government really couldn't do everything, and so that's where I think he begins to move to this more kind of centrist kind of socialism. And that's what came, the Fabian or what have you, although I would say that, Nehru socialism was his own brand.
Right.
That's his own brand. And this is, so this is how it comes. Now, what are the elements of this, which is the original question you asked. So, it was a thought out model. I mean, it's not that somehow some mistakes got made. Is thought out, and apparently everybody supported the model. So it's not like in this sense Nehru was alone and he rammed through the country. I mean, everybody else was supporting what he proposed to do. But the elements were these, that first of all, objective was to combat poverty and become self-sufficient. You can say defense was a part of it as well, and socialism was a part of it. So these were the kind of overall overarching objectives.
Right.
To combat poverty, he felt growth was essential because income levels were so low. He said that therefore, there was only poverty to redistribute.
Right.
And those are his words. I mean,
that was a very interesting quote that you said. Like, what will you redistribute? You will redistribute poverty. Yeah.
So
it's a very interesting quote.
So he himself saw it actually. So therefore, growth was essential. And he says actually that, we needed, this is in the discovery of India already. He says we needed some 600% growth in 10 years' time to actually overcome poverty in 10 years. But he says, we simply couldn't do that. We knew that. So we just set the goal of 300% growth. This is more like, during the National Planning Committee deliberations, not in the plans themselves. But growth kind of was clearly going to be the instrument of poverty eradication.
Right.
How are we going to grow? We need to industrialize. So that's one plank, that industrialization is essential.
Right.
That's one plank. Second plank is that he also sees capitalism as the driving force behind imperialism. And he says that, look, capitalism gives rise to these factories, and factories need raw materials, and they need markets where they can sell the finished product. And so that, of course, means, you colonize, get the raw materials from the colonies, make finished product, and then
sell it back
to them, send it back. So he said, well, when this is a process, and international trade is
therefore also a tool of
international trade is what really connects the imperialism and colonialism and capitalism.
So while I was reading this, I had a question that I wanted to ask you. is this not a fundamentally ahistorical position? Like, did not capitalism come after colonialism in some sense? The East India Company was already out there being mercantile. Spain had already gone to
Correct.
the Americas.
So his
His position is
his
fundamentally
position is that capitalism created these factories,
right.
and now the factories
Demand
really want,
material.
like a monster,
Right.
demand raw material,
Right.
and then they,
But the causality, I mean, there's no causality here, first of all, at all, but the colonies already existed before the factories existed. The Industrial Revolution came after
well,
the colonies.
at least isn't it that the good point actually. So you're saying that
The Industrial
where do
Revolution
you-
started in the 1700s, late 1700s, early 1800s. Colonization had started well
Had
before
already
that.
started.
Well before that, at least a century or two.
good point. So that's something one has
Yeah,
to look
it was
back
so
at.
interesting.
I should have, yeah.
No, but like,
So-
I just wanted to check with you if
Yeah.
if
I
that
will
makes sense.
check this, but certainly this is how he
He viewed it, absolutely.
he
I think
viewed
that's
it,
very
yeah.
clear.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
from
a
the
good
books.
point actually, that whether colonialism had already preceded
The Industrial Revolution,
yeah,
certainly.
but in some ways it may also have been at least some bit of it may be parallel development.
And they did use the
and
colonies in
sometimes,
some ways.
I mean, clearly Nehru was in a way saw things from
His own
1,000 feet
perspective, yes.
above, and so he probably the dots existed, he connected them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And he's not the first
but
person to mistake correlation and causation. Yeah.
Maybe he didn't see that dates on the dots.
Yeah. And like I said, he's not the first person to mistake correlation and causation, and he won't be the last. So
yes, that is true. Yeah. So he built up.
Yes.
Good point. So we'll okay. I'll check this in terms of at least the sequencing.
Yeah.
This is very interesting hypothesis to look back at.
Yeah.
All right. So this being the linkage,
But that
of
was his
course,
view. So capitalism was a no-no for him.
but not only, well, obviously, so obviously he was not keen. He said, capitalism will lead to imperialism.
Yes.
Because of this whole characteristic. But moreover, even international trade itself becomes the handmaiden of imperialism, because you want to produce this, and then you want the markets in the other countries, and so this will give rise to the tendencies for imperialism. And so he says in Discovery of India that we neither wanted to have these tendencies of imperialism ourselves, nor we wanted to be the victims of imperialism again.
Right.
And so therefore we chose that self-sufficiency is what we will seek. So self-sufficiency becomes the other plank of this model. Now when you begin to put this all together, socialism, self-sufficiency, growth, and therefore industrialization. Well, he says that, look, for growth you need to do the investment. For investment you need machinery. And if you are not going to import the machinery, then you need to produce machinery.
Right.
And you need to produce things that are required to produce machinery also, right. So steel and other metals and so forth.
Right.
So it automatically leads him towards heavy industry.
Yes.
So it turns into a heavy industry first kind of approach.
Yeah.
And alongside, in parallel, he had been having these discussions with Mahalanobis also. So, the first conversation these two gentlemen had was almost around 1940 or so.
Yeah.
And later on, Mahalanobis, of course, joins him and as an advisor to the cabinet.
That was another very interesting thing which I think you've brought out that I at least was not aware of earlier, is that the Mahalanobis model is much more about Nehru than it is about Mahalanobis.
It's completely, the academics like to see the formal models. So we all kind of associate a second 5-year plan as being the brainchild of Mahalanobis.
Yes.
But really, Mahalanobis is writing into equations what Nehru wants.
Right.
So he's very much serving Nehru. There is no question, actually, if you look at
and
the details of how
this was it was a revelation from the book.
So for me also, I mean, a lot of discoveries in writing this book, in this sense, because we are all as economists, we've all grown up reading
Exactly.
on Mahalanobis model, and we all criticize Mahalanobis and really think that he was the major main
Architect of this planning infrastructure,
culprit
yes.
who created this kind of system.
Yeah.
But it's really Nehru. So this is how it, so now you want to do heavy industry first. Well, if you want to do heavy industry first, certainly markets are not going to deliver that.
Yeah.
Because you are a highly labor abundant economy.
Yes.
Capital is incredibly scarce.
Yes.
And heavy industry is incredibly capital intensive. So it's very unlikely, although some of the steel industry had existed before.
Yes.
And that may have been some sort of historical accident and all. But largely, if economic forces go to work, it is the textile industry, for example,
Right.
which would really become the dominant industry.
Yes.
Which was doing quite
And there were
well.
some signs of that, exactly.
It was doing very well actually, because if you take the late 1940s, India had about 10% or a little more than 10% share in the world markets in exports. So India is a very large exporter. India is right up there with Japan.
Wow.
And so those are the kind of light manufacturers is where capital would go left on its own.
Yes.
So therefore, Nehru realized that obviously, and the planning became therefore the instrument that look, we got to decide what industries where do we want capital to go. So plans will decide, what are the products we are going to produce in how much quantities. Eventually, even phasing out, that what will be the target for this year, how will be the target for the next year, etc.
Yes.
That evolved, of course, but at least to the extent of, what will you produce in what quantity over the next 5 years. That from the second 5-year plan that we began to decide. Now that, once you are taking that route, because socialism is also an objective, obviously, so some of this heavy industry was going to be in the public sector. But there was also fear that, look, private sector will go its own way. And we got to control the private sector.
Right.
So that's where the licensing system, investment licensing system gets created.
Right.
So this happens already in 1951, the legislation, the industrial, what is it called, IDRA,
yes.
Industries Development and Regulation Act of 1951, that lays down the full machinery of provision of the machinery for licensing system.
Which is one of the instruments that they chose.
Which is the instrument,
This thinking about objectives and instruments is something that I've gotten from you. And I found it very interesting that you've laid out this case that he had a certain set of objectives. Given that mix of objectives, it almost forces him into this set of instruments and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, exactly. These are all outcomes which are the result of the objectives he sets out for himself.
Yes.
Once you have set self-sufficiency, growth and industrialization,
yes,
socialism,
exactly.
Then these are going to be the outcomes that a big public sector will emerge, but private sector will need to be controlled, and therefore in the private sector you need licensing. Now, very interestingly, on the trade side, Nehru really didn't think in protectionist kind of terms.
Right.
So therefore, we had a import licensing system in place that happened by accident actually during the Second World War.
Right.
Because the colonial government, the British government, had to, because of the problems of the British pound itself after the war broke out, it decided to introduce exchange control on the British pound.
Right.
Now, the moment you do exchange control, and of course, most of the colonies became a part of that, because colonies would keep their foreign exchange with the Bank of England in terms of pound sterling.
Right.
So they automatically got covered. India was one of the major colonies, obviously. So and as a part of exchange control system, they had to put in place import licensing.
Right.
Then they also, I also learned actually that the kinds of things that domestic availability condition that used to be that got used for throughout the post-independence era in India for import control system, the essentiality of imports, certification of essentiality, that the open what is it called, OGL,
general license,
open general licensing, all these terms got introduced during the Second World War already. So all of this was a given, and we never dismantled that.
And that's so interesting. In genuine emergency, they picked up these things and then they just let them persist.
It was never, I mean, this is the problem with the laws.
Yeah.
That once created, they never go away. Somebody has to take a very activist view to cut the laws, and replace them by something different. But that's that also. So the machinery had already existed, which was left in place. And then also it turned out that the Bretton Woods system itself went back to the fixed exchange rate system.
Right.
Now, of course, the licensing system automatically came in handy because you needed to worry that given the fixed exchange rate, there was no guarantee that at that exchange rate, the value of your exports and imports will match.
Right.
And then very likely exports will fall short of covering all your imports. So you'll have to then use licensing.
Especially given what you're doing with the rest of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, in the long run, of course, this will happen. But to Nehru's credit, because we had inherited a lot of sterling balances during the Second World War, we were running large surpluses on the balance of payments accounts,
right,
which gave us a lot of sterling balances, which we were holding with the Bank of England.
Right.
So these were used to allow more imports to happen. And so if you look at it from like 1945 to 1956, import policy remains quite liberal.
Right.
Licenses were required, but they will be generally issued. You apply for it. A lot of the consumer goods were also being allowed to be imported.
Right.
So the system sort of works that way, and you I didn't find any references where Nehru discusses anything about trade policy. In fact, one or two of the ministers are also very liberal actually. So that also I quote quite a few. Also in the Times of India, a lot of the editorials come in very critical actually. Of
that I found very interesting.
Of the licensing system.
Which is surprising, because you do quote him saying that international trade, like you said, is a tool of imperialism, but then he doesn't actually do anything about it very seriously.
I mean, he says that, look, we need to get rid of trade.
Right.
And so therefore we need to rejig our production basket to what would fulfill our needs.
Right.
So he says, rather than say that, look, choke off imports completely.
Correct.
And then live with whatever you got, you have,
right,
and let, so meaning take a strong import substitution route.
Yes.
That's not how he is thinking.
That's right.
He's saying that, well, let's use planning, public sector,
right,
and this licensing system to rejig the production basket.
So that the imports are not needed anymore.
So imports will not be needed.
Right.
Yeah, we'll completely come in and rejig the production basket.
Right.
So sometimes even in his speeches talks about, what are our needs? These are our needs, so we should be producing these things. So that's how he thinks of it. So that, but what happens, of course, is that when particularly the second 5-year plan begins to be launched, there are developmental needs.
Yes.
It's a big plan. And so it also requires imports.
Yes.
So there, apparently, the foreign exchange reserves suddenly begin to deplete very rapidly.
Yes.
And by late 1956 or so, we are in red zone.
Right.
Meaning that looks like we very soon will run out of foreign exchange.
Right.
So that's when early 1957 they introduced foreign exchange budgeting, which is really nothing but foreign exchange control, really.
Right.
budgeting pretty much works like foreign exchange control, except that when you call it foreign exchange budgeting, the controls are in the hands of the Department of Economic Affairs here rather than
Industries
the
or-
Reserve Bank of India.
Okay, right. Oh, interesting. Yes.
I mean, Reserve Bank of India, of course, is important in administering many things, but the decision making then is happening how the foreign exchange is to be allocated among different uses and all.
Right.
So there once now here there is also a little bit of debate that happens. B.R. Shenoy actually writes that we should devalue the currency.
Yeah.
And actually, if he had been taken seriously on that, that would have been a very good thing.
Right.
Because that was the time economy was doing well, it was growing. There was no crisis of any sort. Unlike what would happen in the mid 60s when we come to 65 and 66, when actual devaluation in June 1966 is done. And then actually we had two back-to-back droughts. So the economy was in complete shambles.
Right.
Whereas here it was vibrant and very high expectations. So if you devalued, I think it would have really been helpful. Because it would restore the competitiveness of some of our exports and all. But there is no takers. There are no takers actually of this view. And somebody probably tells Nehru about that somebody is saying this, devalue rupees. So he said, there's fantastic nonsense.
Right.
I mean, he uses those words.
And so this is all, but this is after, and you have that section on contemporary reactions to
Correct.
And contemporary thought on
Right.
the plan,
Right.
the second plan, the
Right.
first
Right.
plan, all of that. So that was again a very sort of, I was just so surprised by this complete lack of dissenting views, especially from academics, etc. so early on. It's
Very true. Very true. I was too actually because we also have grown up reading at least B.R. Shenoy was
Right.
very opposed to
Right.
the various elements of the Nehru model.
right.
But actually, when you read his dissent, so for the benefit of the viewers, let me just describe actually
Please.
how this
Please.
happened. So the first 5-year plan itself was not a serious plan, and this is not where the Nehru's philosophy really takes the shape.
Right.
By the time plan is approved, it's already 2 years of the plan period have already passed. So it's only a 3-year plan,
Right.
if you think about it. And a lot of projects were ongoing and all, and some got added, and that was, they pulled it all together. That
Yes.
became the first 5. But for second 5-year plan, there was a lot of preparation. A planning commission was already a very well-established institution.
Right.
And Mahalanobis had been instructed, and Nehru asks him around, I think, 1954 or early 55, to write this draft second 5-year plan.
Right.
And this is where Mahalanobis kind of pulls together all elements of Nehru's ideas and puts it into what we all came to know as the Mahalanobis model.
Yeah.
And what the model also says is that, if you want a rapid growth in the short run, then you should allocate quite a bit in the production of consumer goods.
Right.
But if long-term growth is the objective, then you should really postpone consumption now
And invest.
and invest early in the machinery, so that machinery making and so forth. So that would actually give you in the longer run much faster growth.
Right.
So that rationalizes very nicely
heavy industry.
the Nehru's heavy industry approach.
Right.
That let's invest in the heavy industry.
Somewhere forgetting that compounding exists as a force.
Yes, well, I mean, a lot of things that are being, not only compounding, but also that in the implementation, what this will lead to ultimately, it will create a monster,
Yes.
which will become basically
And that actually is,
impossible to get rid of.
Yeah, your book is actually a little bit of Frankenstein, second coming, if I was to think about it. You've said it so right. They've taken elements and just put together a monster. Really.
Yeah.
And that's what it paints. But
Yes.
please, sorry. I
Yeah.
interrupted
So but Nehru also is an intellectual. So he likes, and this is why Mahalanobis is there very much, and he encourages a lot of debate. Mahalanobis also by this time has, he created the Indian Statistical Institute way back, and he uses that as the platform to bring in a lot of the foreign statisticians, economists and all from France, from Eastern Europe, Russia, various places, actually, a lot of Eastern European countries also.
Yeah.
And they all endorse it.
Yes.
They all endorse it. Domestically, he takes 21 leading economists. C.D. Deshmukh is the 21st, who is the finance minister at this time and also member of the planning commission. And so he heads this, he is the chair of this group. So there are 20 other economists. Gadgil is the deputy chairman of this committee.
Right.
And they are given the task of writing their own papers if they want to, but also then comment on the draft second 5-year plan written by Mahalanobis. So there's a lot of deliberations that happen, and a lot of work gets done in the compendium of the papers that the economists panel, the 20 of them, C.D. Deshmukh obviously didn't write, but the others wrote multiple papers and all. So it's quite, and for this book, I tried to read virtually every one of those papers and all to be sure that I wasn't missing anything. And largely then the memo that is drafted by this economist panel is very enthusiastic about the plan. It not only endorses but actually wants to go much further.
Right.
So if you read the panel's, it's fairly long write-up, and so in a lot of the places it feels that the plan is not going far enough in terms of regulation. They need more regulation than
That's amazing.
They also then go in and complain about the administrative capability and the governance problem. So in a way, there's a bit of a contradiction.
Right.
That you're saying that there's not enough administrative capacity to do all this, but you're also then recommending piling up much more regulation.
Right.
And there are a couple of rather outlandish ideas there. But anyway, that's the story. There are two economists on this panel who are not in full agreement. One actually is disagreeing and therefore writes a dissent. That's B.R. Shenoy. And the other is Vakil from Bombay, who along with his student, I think, P.R. Brahmanand, writes a couple of papers for this compendium of papers. And their views are slightly different, although they don't.
Disagree
he doesn't sign any note or doesn't write any. If I remember
correctly, they want more focus on agriculture. Is that?
Yeah. So they wanted that we should really have the strategy centered on agriculture, and so do it in agricultural, invest in agricultural machinery.
Right.
And as more marketable surplus arises in agriculture as a result of this effort, the agricultural sector will be in a position to buy the machinery.
Right.
So in this sense, there will be fair exchange, and they will reinforce the demand and supply, and otherwise they say that, look, you don't know, you're producing heavy industry, but who is buyer of this, and what are we going to do about food, etc.
Right.
So they certainly are to some degree on the right track, but they are not opposed to heavy industry per se. They are just saying that do heavy industry in agricultural machinery. Right. Shenoy, on the other hand, is much more vocal. He thinks that this whole size of the plan, which will involve huge amount of deficit financing, is wrong. It's going to lead to inflation, and we'll all become very uncompetitive and all. He touches on that competition is important, etc. But at this point, he doesn't attack the central element of the plan, which is the heavy machinery.
This was another revelation for me, because we'd always known
So
that
that
Shenoy
also,
wrote a
yeah,
dissent.
there also I was a bit, so I read more and more carefully that am I missing it, but it isn't there. He doesn't attack the emphasis on heavy industry
And planning.
And yeah, planning he may have, no, he's not a planning person, so competition he talks about,
Right.
but it's
with that
not so.
The deficit
Only
is the
little
focus.
later, I think, by early to mid 60s,
Right.
he's writing straight attacking that this whole heavy industry stuff is wrong.
Right.
But there are no takers by then. Actually, by then the train has left, as far as India is concerned. And what has happened is by then, even he is writing in these obscure places initially, at least, in a journal that was coming out of the University of Chicago. And by this time, he is also kind of connected into the more parallel society, MPS. And so that has become his audience, more or less.
Right.
And nobody in India is reading what he's writing.
Speaking to the converted, and it's not really helping.
Yeah. I mean, later on, he pulls it all together in a volume and all, which Jagdish Bhagwati reviews and all. But that's, pretty much remains at the academic level. He's simply not an influential enough economist at the, to change the course.
Right.
So he has all the right instincts, right ideas. Some of it is a little later, meaning, the opposition to heavy industry becomes more central to his later writings. So this is where, the only one voice, of course, there is one very clear voice which is opposed to this and very well argued, is that of Milton Friedman.
Right.
But Milton Friedman had been largely sent by the United States government. He was not the invitee of Mahalanobis, for sure. And he just sits probably for a few weeks in the finance ministry, writes his wonderful note, which I think gets buried. Nobody knows about it. Nobody reads it, it seems, because there are no references to this note in anything, including in the memorandum of the panel of 21 economists.
Right.
The first reference that at least I could track down was in this book by P.T. Bauer, who was, of course, a member of a more parallel society himself.
Right.
And obviously, Friedman,
knew him. Yes.
There's a same group of people, they know each other and all. So he quotes from this note by Milton Friedman. It's about, just 6,000 words. It's not a long note. But he touches on almost everything, the issue of fixed exchange rate, the emphasis on heavy industry, the fact that you're leaving cottage industry without any capital. And he really puts this thing very beautifully. He says that, look, at one extreme, you have this entire capital working with no labor. At the other extreme, you have this labor in cottage and small and medium, not even medium.
Which is a point I'd separately heard you make. Probably
well no, I was influenced as clearly. I mean, in this form I read, I've obviously expressed the same ideas differently.
Yes.
But when I have made this point, I think I'd already read Milton Friedman's, so I was clearly influenced there. So here is the whole labor which you have put into this cottage village and small industry, but you're giving it no capital.
Right.
And so this is a very inefficient use both of labor and capital. And he says you need to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So he really got it completely right, and this is how ultimately Korea's and Taiwan's and Singapore's, etc., began their development process and really went to places.
Right.
But to be fair, generally Nehru had full support. And whereas Nehru in general was pragmatic, and I gave you the example that, from very radical socialist, he became much more moderate socialist.
So I had a question for you here you paint a very grim picture of how much support his view had, right? And I was actually very, it was a disturbing thing to realize. But I wanted to ask you, how much of it could be just a selection effect that they're reaching out to people who, because they have been invited, will support?
No.
Because at least before there were these tall leaders who then unfortunately passed away. Gandhi was opposed, Sardar Patel was opposed to these kinds of things. You mentioned A.D. Shroff, Meenu Masani, all of these people also. but these people are very sort of fringe almost, right?
So yeah, yes. Actually, look, Patel, I returned to it at the end of the book, right? Asking the question, what if Patel was younger and Nehru was older? But once Patel is taken off the scene, which is December 1950, Nehru has no equal. I mean, he is the tallest leader by, many meters.
There is no second.
There is no, I mean, others are pygmies around him. So he is dominant. His view is going to, and this is why also, if you look at Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956,
Right.
turns more socialist
Very much.
compared with the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948. So he pushes it back towards in that direction. He also brings in this whole building a socialistic pattern of society as being the objective, broad objective, and and also the scope of public sector in the 56 resolution expands relative to what it was in the 1948 resolution and all. So
his views
very
are
much
really-
is the dominant leader, so he's unchallenged. But to be fair to him, he invites everybody, and there is no fixing of this panel of economists going on.
Right.
These are leading economists from different parts of the world,
Right.
parts of India.
Right.
So he does want to, have full kind of geographical
Views.
representation, and also from the south, from the west, from the east, wherever you can get good, solid.
But I guess everyone can tell which way the wind is blowing, right? Except for the rare.
So I don't
person.
know what it is. I mean, whether they also look. The whole thing is that everybody has been really educated and trained
Right.
in the British socialism. At that time, you're not going to America for education. You're coming to UK.
Right.
So either you have yourself been to UK and been exposed to all these ideas, and London School by this time had been established and was the seat of learning, and
Cambridge and Oxford were both famously socialist.
they were
models.
also, but this one was actually set up by the Fabian socialists, which is why actually this whole confusion arose that Nehru was in London and all, and and a lot of these people have been taught by the famous political scientists at London School. I'm forgetting the name.
Howard, no.
But anyway,
We'll come back to it.
Yeah. So in a way, he has a lot of company.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, somehow it was an accident that B.R. Shenoy happens to be at London School when Hayek actually comes in and gives a few lectures.
Right.
And this is how his own kind of association with the Austrian school
Starts.
begins, and he is influenced by the Austrian school. So he is a little different. But others, I think, so even if economists, perhaps homegrown, were largely grown by the economy, by those who had been exposed to the British
They would have agreed
socialism.
anyway. It wasn't just.
So I think it was not. I don't think it was so much that the wind is blowing that way and therefore you go that way. It was the dominant view.
Right.
You read Bhagwati's writings also. I mean, he did write about devaluation, etc. And the 1970 book is, of course, very much wanting to move a bit away from what was done. But they endorse Bhagwati and Desai, if you look at the book, and they endorse planning as such. In fact, when Bhagwati reviews the book, there is a collection of articles by Shenoy.
Right.
That is one of the things he criticizes, that he doesn't believe in planning. So at this point, and if you look Bhagwati and Desai book, by comparison with everything that he subsequently kind of argues and advocates, come to 80s and 90s, it is very mild critique of the Nehru framework.
Interesting.
Means basically saying that, okay, planning is fine, but you don't need to plan the whole economy.
Right.
And allow flexibility in the exchange rate.
Right.
And pick a few sectors that you want to develop and focus on that, but the rest leave free. So he certainly wanted the licensing system to be more or less dismantled, or that but for the rest of it, so it was a very rational, but that had some possibility of having a hearing. But what Shenoy argued was so far from what the mainstream at the time was, that there was no chance that
and Milton Friedman, unfortunately, nobody read or.
Sorry?
Milton Friedman, nobody read or paid attention to.
Milton Friedman note appears in the 80s somewhere, you know.
We didn't even know about it. It's not in the official proceedings.
And I saw it, I came across it myself in the late 1990s or early 2000s, you know. By chance, I started writing for the Economic Times at that time, and that's how I first actually. So I wrote one of my very early columns was on Milton Friedman's note. So this is how, you know, the whole evolution happens. So this is the thought. Now, A.D. Schroff you mentioned. So he actually did start a forum for free enterprise. But he is very explicit saying that, you know, we are simply a group trying to inform about the importance of free enterprise to the large public. But they are not acting as a pressure group. Leaning against the, you know, and on the 1950 on this devaluation stuff in 57, 58, when Shenoy writes that we must devalue the rupee, makes a good case for it, but everybody else leans against it, including A.D. Schroff. A.D. Schroff also says that no, this is not the time to devalue the rupee and all. You know. What they are generally saying that look at how much the private sector is contributing, but that's it. You know, they're not working as a pressure group against the whole planning kind of machinery. This is the time. By the way, we forgot one major player here: the industrialists themselves. So you know, after they all came together in the planning committee, National Planning Committee, 1944 and 1945, in two parts, they write the Bombay Plan, which is well known. You know, there's a Bombay Plan by the industrialists there, and the authorship includes both J.R.D. Tata and G.D. Birla, and there are 6 others. You can read that on the one hand and read the second 5-year plan, or you can read Mahalanobis's draft second 5-year plan. They are more or less in agreement. I mean, the Bombay Plan endorses the public sector. It endorses emphasis on heavy industry. It endorses self-sufficiency. So, you know, some nuances may differ, but broad brush picture is not a big difference. And Nehru later uses that in a debate that, you know, the industrialists themselves had endorsed my second 5-year plan in their Bombay Plan. I mean, you know. So, in effect, you know, all the constituencies that matter, political class, the intellectuals, the economists generally, business people, they are all in agreement. So they go so far as to say that, or, you know, the heavy industry has to be done by the public sector because private sector doesn't have that much resources, etc. You know, so that is how it all kind of comes together.
And thus the monster was created, which is what you then go on to describe. So
this is all part 1 of the book, but part 2 I then describe really largely for the benefit of the younger readers. That, you know, today a lot of people complain about the government interference or interventions in too many places, etc. But they ought to see what existed, where we came from, you know. So,
and where we could go back. You know, I just want people to be careful. You know, it's not
exactly.
These things cannot be taken for granted.
So particularly, there are 2 chapters, particularly chapter 6, which is on investment licensing, and chapter 8, which is on import licensing. And these were tough chapters to write, you know, I really suffered through.
You say that, and you've written it in your book also. But is the pain that you're feeling because you had to detail all of this, or just?
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's because you have to fit the full story. And you really have to read carefully many of the details. You know, none of this is in one place. What is the process? You get one piece of information in one report, another piece in another report. So it was a lot of very hard work to piece it all together. And you'll see, because I quote all the different sources that from which I'm drawing. and there are a large number of different sources, and then pulling it all together into a whole narrative, single narrative.
And as tortured as that process clearly is, I'm sure it must have been even worse. There must be pieces that we are just not aware of anymore because they don't show up.
Yeah,
in the
so
records.
this is so largely I got it. I think there may be still some missing elements, but largely I got it, and I've written the sources from which.
Please do paint that picture.
Oh, that's quite tough, So look, so if you look at this, where we are is investment licensing. That has to make a decision on where the private investments will go. Well, first of all, there is public sector.
Yes.
And public enterprises get created by the ministries to which they belong. There is, steel ministry that does all this steel stuff. Then there's probably by the, I don't know at what time the heavy industries ministry came, but a lot of the heavy industry was also. So, fine. So you got these ministries, public sector investments. For the private sector, investment license is required, and it's not an easy thing because the way it works, first the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
So that lays out the broad picture.
Yes.
Then the information has to flow that where the government, is going to permit investment.
Yes.
And then the entrepreneurs have to come in and make their applications.
Right.
And then there is a whole process of evaluation of these applications within the bureaucracy.
Right. They'll evaluate it against the plan. They'll evaluate it against what the government is trying to do.
Yes. And moreover, because by 1957, we already had the foreign exchange budgeting in place.
Right.
So therefore, you also had to worry about the foreign exchange component.
Yes.
That where the foreign exchange will be required, and will that foreign exchange be available?
Right.
And particularly if the machinery had to be imported,
right.
then you needed permission from another committee, which dealt with the capital investments.
Right.
So there are 3 sets of permissions, licenses you're looking for. You investment license, then you need the import license. Investment license, of course, is a one-time thing. Once you're allowed to invest, it comes in and all. But for import license, you have to go every 6 months.
Yeah.
Because I think we had made it every 6 months.
Right.
Somewhere in the early 60s.
Even for the investment license, you point out that if you want to expand, for instance,
That's
then
true.
you have to go again.
Then you have to go again.
Yeah.
Yes. And that sometimes also is a problem, whether something is an expansion or it's a new activity or something. Right. So there is that complication. Then we have the issue of all the import licenses. And import licenses have to coordinate with the foreign exchange allocation.
Right.
And foreign exchange allocation itself is a huge exercise for the Department of Economic Affairs, because it has to first estimate how much foreign exchange is going to be available in the next 6 months, because you can't predict 2 years later what will you have. It's just next 6 months. Even that is very uncertain.
Yes.
But you make some estimate, make some guesses about it.
Yes.
Then you decide, okay, there are some imports, essential imports like petroleum and food, etc., that you separate out. But the rest, then you go in and say, okay, this is what I'm going to allocate to the public enterprises. Yeah. Now the rest of it, I allocate to an agency, which then is going to allocate it at the enterprise level. So, because the allocation has to happen ultimately at the enterprise level.
Yes.
So the translation of these targets from the 5-year plans to the enterprise level is a very elaborate exercise. Yeah. And there's no consideration of efficiency in any way.
Yeah.
They have no expertise to judge who is more efficient, who is less efficient. Yeah. But you're not even trying to do that, because licenses get issued first come, first served.
Yeah.
So whoever has the knowledge of the system whoever figures out that, yeah, this is the sector in which the licenses will become easily available, goes and puts their application first. When sequentially another one comes, maybe that fellow would have been more efficient. But if you have already authorized enough capacity build up in that particular activity, you will deny that license. So the efficiency was never an issue, and then also it created effective monopolies. Right? Because whoever got the license, then the government decided that this is the capacity we wanted to create. Well, you know that nobody else is now. It's a shortage economy also because the capital was very limited, so nobody is getting enough to saturate the market, and so there's shortage. So you get the scope for monopoly pricing there. Both sources of competition have been shut off because foreign competition is shut off through restrictions on imports. Whatever, in fact, the policy is that whatever is domestically available will not be allowed to be imported. So, however poor the substitute product is domestically, what you're producing domestically,
you have to make do
it may be a very poor substitute for what you would import from abroad, but that's it. As long as anybody says that I produce this product, and imports are not allowed. Domestically, you don't have competition because licensing is controlling the capacity. So inefficiencies arise. The government then also realizes that this leads to these monopoly profits, so it tries to control the prices. Well, the moment you control the prices, you have the problem of allocating the product. Because if the price is at a very low level, demand exceeds the supply, and so you get
anywhere you have to distort the market. You'll have to distort the market in many other places.
Many other places. We were talked earlier a little bit about the fact that the shortages got created. Because imports could not be allowed anyway because of the foreign exchange restriction, but also because anything that somebody said domestically is available is not allowed. And when these shortages happen, of course, the seller can charge a high price. What economists call the monopoly pricing begins to happen. That then leads the government to come in, step in and say that, oh, there's too much profit, so it controls the price. So that leads to the price controls. You do the price controls, then there is demand at that low price exceeds the available supply.
So that's the shortage.
So then you have to start then this process of allocating the available supply. So, there was a whole, within the steel ministry, for example, there was a steel authority who would allocate this available steel across its different users. So you have to actually so it's not only that you are getting an import license for inputs that you needed to import, but you also needed the allocation of some of the critical inputs from the domestic sources. So steel authority had to decide, on the consumer products, we all grew up knowing about the scooters if you wanted to buy, or a car or you wanted to buy, or if you needed a telephone, there were long queues because supply was less than.
And so just to make the long queues point a little more real, the long queues lasted from 8 to 10 years at times.
Yes.
I think people don't understand what the long queue can mean. And this is the thing, this is the picture that you've painted, right? That if you want to set up a factory, you need an investment license. If you want to import an input, you need an import license.
And foreign exchange allocation.
And a foreign exchange allocation. So it's at two ends, not just one.
And the process is not easy either, you see, because some ministry has to certify that the product is essential. Somebody has to certify that it is not domestically available. How do you even verify whether something is domestically available or not? So you often had to advertise in the trade journal that I need this, can anybody supply? And you hoped that nobody will respond. But if somebody responded that, I can supply,
then you won't get your license.
You will not get the license. So,
and even for domestic inputs, you have to wait to be allocated something if you want to make something.
Absolutely. And then there were these, some of the other inputs like cement was a controlled item. So you needed, so for the domestic ones, we didn't call it license, we call it permit. You need a permit.
Right.
So if you need some cement, 2 bags of cement for some repairs you want to do in the house, you have to apply for a permit, get the permit. And it often used to be that if you are carrying these sacks of cement
Right.
from wherever it is stocked by the government, take the delivery and then haul it back to
Right.
to wherever you actually need it, some inspector will inevitably beat you along on the way and then
Demand that you show your documents.
that you have the permit. Because there's a black market, obviously in these situations,
Right.
in the situations of shortages, black markets appear.
Absolutely.
Right? And so the inspectors come in that to enforce that you didn't buy it in black. Did you buy it in black or do you have the permit? So these were all,
And obviously, this is the license permit quota Raj.
that's what it is.
This is what it actually is.
Yes.
And obviously, it engenders a lot of corruption. Because
So
obviously,
it whole created a culture of corruption in a
Right.
way, if you think of the 50s and early 60s, generally, especially the top bureaucracy was very clean,
Yeah.
They took pride in, and my father worked for this state government, and I once asked him that, if people around you who are working are corrupt, but you are not, don't you feel a bit of a threat?
right.
So at that time he said, no, it's the other way around, that they are afraid. So they don't want to be working where I work.
Amazing.
So, but that changed, not today. If a particular office is generally corrupt, very difficult for the honest officer to actually survive.
Absolutely.
It's a little different.
Absolutely.
So the culture changed, culture shifted. And so these are all byproducts, as you say. One thing leads
Yeah.
to
Yeah. And
the unintended consequences, as we call them.
yes. And all of this is part of the legacy, which is
And it's
what
all,
you talk
yeah.
about.
So this is of course, so this is the legacy. But the bigger legacy, of course, or the much longer lasting legacy, which is the third part of it.
Yes.
So just to wrap up the second part, basically, I should say that, as a result of the kind of license permit Raj that got created, and with no regard whatsoever to efficiency, in a way, the planning commission couldn't figure even within heavy industry, which product should be produced, which should not be produced. Then when it came to allocation, you didn't know which enterprise will be efficient, which will be inefficient. Then even after that, when you did, there is no competition.
Right.
So inefficiencies were all over, every place, there was no contestability in the market.
Problem of knowledge in society.
So that ended up meaning that, in spite of a fair bit of investment actually taking place, our growth rate was very low.
Yeah.
Somewhere between 3.5% to 4%, and with population growing at 2+% per year, the per capita incomes really grew very, very little. And so therefore, this whole idea of eradicating poverty didn't translate into the outcomes. So that is the
In
last
fact, sir,
chapter.
you show that poverty actually increased.
There is
this
also
time,
some
by some
period
measures.
initially,
Yeah.
yeah. In some of the until 70, really,
Yeah.
if you take the trend poverty
Yes. There was slight
trend line, there is a very slight kind of upward movement,
Right.
you see. So you see, because again, to write it, to put it more succinctly, what has happened really is that this whole process of generating growth is very exclusionary. The bulk of the workforce is either in agriculture, that's not where you're making your growth effort, or it is in these small cottage household industries,
Right.
these very tiny little enterprises. So they hardly have any access to capital.
Right.
So in effect, growth, where growth is happening, beneficiaries are very few.
Right.
So clearly the benefits are not going to go to the bulk of the population, and therefore poverty,
And that reminds me of the table that you give, and it was a shocking table. The percentage of population employed in agriculture remained exactly the same.
unchanged.
Unchanged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look 51 and 71
Yes.
census,
Yes.
it's the same percentage.
Incredible.
Yeah.
For 20 years of
Yes.
growth.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Nothing, because
Exactly
even
what you said.
the population that's urban doesn't really, it's all sitting in the
Yes.
these little enterprises, the cottage industry
which can't grow, which can't expand.
and household industry.
So exactly what
And
you
they
said.
have no, but also there is the other fallout, which is that usually the skill creation happens by the workers working in a factory.
Right.
But there are no factories in which there are very few people who are working in these factories,
Learning by doing,
which are
as they call it.
often engineers and all, more kind of skill
Yes.
kind of. Also, by the way, the investment, whatever resources in education are being put, a good chunk of it is going into higher education, because
IITs.
to man the factories, you need engineers and you need managers.
Right.
So you invested in the IITs and other engineering colleges,
Right.
what are now called MNITs. In those days, they were called regional engineering colleges, RECs, and management schools.
Right.
But there is this dramatic statistic that P.T. Bauer gives in his 1960 critique of the Second Five-Year Plan, that the development expenditure on elementary education in the Second Five-Year Plan was just half of the investment made in one of the 3 steel mills.
That's
unbelievable. There is
for the entire
one
country.
half of the for the entire country.
Yeah.
So because states hardly had anything, much of the investment was happening from the central government at the time. So a lot of kind of unintended consequences take place.
And this is a beautiful, I think, if I just, you do summaries much better than me, but allow me to sort of paint it how I saw it, right? You do this beautiful, you chalk out how Nehru settled for himself a set of principles and objectives that he wanted to achieve. Given those principles and objectives, he was forced into a few instruments to start with, planning,
investment licensing,
all of
licensing.
These. Given that all of these were operating, all the negative consequences started piling up, so he was forced into even more and more. And that sort of did not achieve any of the objectives that he would have sort of set out to achieve. He just had the wrong objectives, and there was no poverty alleviation at all. There was no movement into there was some heavy industry, but the industry was uncompetitive.
So industrialization did happen. So industrial growth, you see some,
was
6% or so per year. So that is happening. But the model is exclusionary.
Yes.
So therefore, also if you look at it from the Milton Friedman kind of prism, what you have done is that, we often talk about inclusive growth, that the growth be inclusive. But actually, there is also the other side of it. That so that part is looking at how inclusion is flowing from growth.
Yeah.
But there is also the other side of it, that from inclusion can flow growth.
Right.
And inclusion would simply mean to me that if labor is your major factor, the most abundant factor, most plentiful factor of production, you use that effectively. That will give you higher growth.
Yes.
So if your growth process is inclusive, you are likely to achieve higher rate of growth.
Yeah.
Which at least, if you do the stylized comparison, Koreans, Singaporean, Taiwanese, later Chinese, development model was much more inclusive. And they could actually produce, growth rates of about 9 to 10%.
Right.
We have never been able to actually, on a sustained basis, been able to do 9 to 10% growth.
Right.
And I think a very important, very key aspect or very key reason for that is that we have never used our most abundant factor, namely labor, effectively. That has remained always underemployed and not enough capital to work with.
Yes.
So you don't achieve your full productivity. And also then, if you're not working with enough capital, you don't acquire skills.
Right.
So this is where, so we have had to then take up, the unintended consequence, again, you have to take up the skill formation as a separate activity.
Exactly.
There's skilling of the workforce.
Yes.
But if there are factories,
They get
then the
skilled.
skilling is automatically happening in the factories, and it's happening in a way, in a useful way, that you acquire the skills that are actually useful in the factory. And as your production structure becomes more complex, the skill levels also rise. I mean, that's a process that worked quite well in these other East Asian countries, Taiwan, Singapore, Korea, later China.
Yes. And on labor, you document a very interesting double whammy. One, of course, is that the focus was on heavy industry and leaving others to small and cottage. But then there's the labor law element to it, which you also document, which makes labor more expensive than...
That also, but in addition, of course, that in the long run, right, this particularly has, in the immediate run, it's okay, maybe it didn't matter because you are doing all the allocation anyway.
Yes.
And you are really putting all the allocation into capital intensive industries and all. But when you open up, these laws become very, very pernicious, because then your investment process still remains very highly capital intensive.
Yes.
Because you don't want to use labor.
Another element of the
unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences and the legacy that the model left behind, which is the...
And it really hardwired not just the planners or policymakers in that way, but it also hardwired the business people. Because all these strikes that happened, particularly the entire textile industry got decimated, by the strikes. This famous labor leader Datta Samant. Really, so all kinds of textile mills in Bombay, Ahmedabad, Kanpur, all shut down over a period of about 10 to 15 years. And that really left the entrepreneurs very leery of going into the industries where they will have to deal with a lot of labor.
Right.
So even when you liberal, in a way, some bit of de facto liberalization, you can say, happened on labor, whereas in the 70s, 80s, judiciary, in any case that the entrepreneurs try to contest, they will always rule in favor of the labor. Laws didn't matter. What they
justice doesn't matter.
It didn't matter. That basic view of the judiciary was that, look, corporates have deep pockets and workers don't, and therefore, regardless of the merit of the case, they will rule in favor of the worker.
Right.
So that kind of, so that at least changed, at least at the level of the Supreme Court when you come to the 2000s decade.
Right.
But nevertheless, the business people by that time are so hardwired that let's not get into labor intensive industry. So you go to CII today, to go to FICCI, ask anybody what they are doing.
Yeah.
You'll not find any entrepreneurs represented in these industry bodies who are actually doing labor intensive products, the light industry, basically, the light manufacturers.
We underperform massively
in light manufacturers.
Yeah.
So this effect remained. But there is also the more kind of actually the wider impact that this era has, which comes from the political class inheriting the ideas of socialism, bureaucracy inheriting the same ideas, economists and intellectuals inheriting the same, and the business people also inheriting those very same ideas, and that is the aspect of the Nehru era, which I then come to in part 3 of the book.
Yes.
And so I start first with the political class, that how and Congress party remained quite dominant through more or less, if you take it, except the last 5, 6, last 4 years, when not even 4 actually, last 2 years.
I mean, the brief period after emergency, and then the last 2 or 3 years with VP Singh and Chandrasekhar.
So other than that, Congress really, as far as the 20th century was concerned, Congress really remained dominant, and everybody in the Congress had inherited Nehru's ideas. And so when Mrs. Indira Gandhi comes in, actually she is more socialist than Nehru. Now people,
Things
of
became
course,
a lot worse before.
yeah,
they
things
became better.
and yeah, and she is both a populist and socialist.
Yeah.
Now some people say that she really basically followed what P. N. Aksar, her principal secretary, did. But I sort of disagree in the book actually with that view, because no doubt that Huxley really did compliment in a very strong sort of way. He did magnify, let us say, what Indira Gandhi wanted to do. But Ms. Gandhi herself was actually a hardcore socialist. I mean, if you look at past history, didn't speak very much in till very late. Even in her early years as a prime minister, she didn't speak a lot, So, but her ideas were certainly formed. She was president of the Congress Party during Nehru's time, I think 1959, somewhere there. She was also, mentoring all these socialists. There was this socialist forum within the Congress Party, and they looked up to her because obviously she was the daughter of Nehru. So she did sort of patronize them. So it's not, she certainly was, but she was also opportunist a bit. She was a politician ultimately, So you see this magnification, and then P. N. Aksar, as I said, magnified that but she was the one who brought P. N. Aksar.
Right.
So clearly, there are references I make that she wanted somebody who would be to her left, not to her right, for sure. Because there is a book by Jairam Ramesh where this is a book on P. N. Aksar largely.
Okay.
But both Indira Gandhi and P. N. Aksar, how they so I think it's called something like Intertwined Lives or something.
Okay.
And this is where you see that Jairam quotes some people that T. N. Call, I think, who was the ambassador to Russia, or she supposedly consulted him who she could bring in, because she says that L.K. Jha, whom Lal Bahadur Shastri had appointed as the principal, as his secretary. In those days, it wasn't called principal secretary, it was much later. Nehru never had actually a secretary in the PMO. He had a very different setup. He used to use the people from the Planning Commission, because his objective was to concentrate all the power in Planning Commission.
Right.
So that's what he did. Lal Bahadur Shastri came in. So Nehru died in May 1964, and 1964 to I think it was January 1966. There was a short period when Lal Bahadur Shastri was the prime minister, and Prime Minister Shastri tried to make the ministries a little more powerful, meaning he tried to balance the power structure a bit. So he appointed a secretary in his own office, and he appointed L.K. Jha, who was an economist, very much, and a very bright person. So that way he tried to weaken the Planning Commission a little bit and restore the power of the ministry, as opposed to Nehru, who wanted all concentration with him,
right,
and that he used Planning Commission for that purpose.
Right.
And so ministries were not very happy during Nehru's period, because the power, Planning Commission had the final say, more or less, in many of these matters that the ministries ought to be otherwise deciding.
Right.
So when Indira Gandhi comes in, L.K. Jha is the secretary, and so she wants to replace him. And she asks T.N. Call, this is on the authority of Jairam Ramesh's book, and she is supposedly has said that L.K. Jha is to my right, and I want somebody, And so he also then suggests B.K. Nehru. T.N. Call suggests B.K. Nehru, but for the same reason, she rejects him too. So then she actually knew of P.N. Aksar herself, actually, because in London when she, or in UK when she and Firoz Gandhi, her husband, actually they lived even before they got married, and so P.N. Aksar used to frequent there. And P.N. Aksar, so they were all committed, socialists. You see it from that period. So she was aware of P.N. Aksar, who was in UK at the time.
The British got us into trouble in more ways than one.
Yeah, no. I mean, this legacy really ultimately, you say, is coming from there. Because socialism really was the dominant philosophy at the British universities at the time, and most notably the London School, but also Cambridge and all. So which is where all our leaders either kind of went and studied, or drew inspiration from. So that's clearly so the British influence therefore is very deep.
Yes.
So this is where and then Indira Gandhi has all this power struggle with the Congress leadership in the organization. It's called the Congress organizational wing, or sometimes referred to as the syndicate. Namudripad and Morarji Desai, Patil, these are the people who perhaps even Kamraj, they are in the Congress organization, and they want to dominate. And the reason they appointed, actually, I mean, she was appointed by this organizational wing, and they thought that she will be very pliable, but she quickly kind of proved to them that she wanted to rule. She wanted to be the real prime minister, not a dummy prime minister. So she really pushed back and all, and that ultimately came to a head when suddenly the president of India died, Zakir Hussain, unexpectedly, and a new president had to be elected. And they knew that, look, in this power struggle, whoever is the president will ultimately, he's the one who invites who become
prime minister.
So it mattered substantively whose candidate becomes the president. So the Congress, the organizational wing chooses Sanjeeva Reddy, and she sort of at the convention accepts it and all, comes back. She doesn't reveal her cards and all, and then she comes back to Delhi and announces that she was going to nationalize the banks. And that bank nationalization makes her incredibly popular. I mean, people come out in the streets in Delhi to celebrate and whatnot, So it was a very popular move at the time. Then she goes on to say that I'm going to, people can vote their Atma ki Awaaz, so they inner voice is what I'm going to follow and others can do. And then she puts up the then vice president, getting the name, V.V. Giri. As he announces, actually, at her instance, of course, his own candidacy, and she says, I'm going to listen to my inner voice in voting, and lo and behold, in the end, V.V. Giri wins the election.
Do you have a view, sir, on if any of that old guard would have had you do a Sardar Patel, what if at this moment?
No, that gets tested. So that gets tested. So I come to that, right? So this is where I say that, look, this whole socialist ideology and socialist thinking that became so entrenched during the Nehru era continued with us and continued to influence the future events. So the very first, therefore, opportunity for some sort of change. Now, this is only a struggle between more socialist and less socialist. It's not like the syndicate is a really very pro-market and so forth. They are less socialist. Let's say they'll give probably the private industries a little more room than Indira Gandhi would do. So that's the difference. But even with that difference, it's the more radical socialist side represented by Mrs. Indira Gandhi which wins. That's a first. Then the second opportunity comes, after Indira Gandhi announces this emergency and all, loses the election, and in 1978 she calls the elections back. So this emergency is announced in 75.
Yeah.
And so election gets announced in 77. And the elections happen in 77. And the Janata Party, which is the
combined opposition.
All parties merge themselves actually into what comes to be called the Janata Party, including what was BJP at the time, Jan Sangh, So Jansangh is a part of also merges itself into the Janata Party, and they score a very huge victory. And so Morarji Desai becomes prime minister, part of the syndicate, right? And he was associated with the big business and all. He was always accused of this, that he's he curries favor with the big business and all. He's a capitalist. At least in those days, we used to think, "Arey haan, ye to capitalist hai." But the government he runs is as socialist as Ms. Indira Gandhi's government. In fact, one of the things he does, one of the major things he does is to expand the scope of the small scale industries reservation.
Right.
It really expands very dramatically, actually, during that 2 to 3 year period.
Right.
But nothing else, the license permit Raj remains in place, no big changes happen. They say liberalize trade, maybe some little bit here and there. There was a committee appointed which did try to rationalize, this PC Alexander committee was appointed.
Yes.
So some rationalization begins to happen of the license regime. It's largely rationalization. What does happen, however, is that the open general licensing begins to be opened up here, OGL.
Right.
And that begins a process of very piecemeal trade liberalization in the 1980s.
Right.
But, largely the opportunity is lost, didn't happen. Mrs. Indira Gandhi comes back 1980. This is January 80, I think. There's election and she wins a thumping majority.
Yes.
Runs the government for practically close to 5 years. She is assassinated in October 1984. End of October, 31st October 1984 is, I think, the day. During that period, she had done some similar kind of reforms during emergency 75, 76. These piecemeal little changes here and there. Those changes she makes also during this period. It's really not genuine liberalization. But when she leaves, basically, in October 84, even counting whatever little kind of piecemeal liberalizing moves she may have made, clearly the regime is far more restrictive than what when Nehru had left.
Right.
In 1964, for example, for foreign investment, Nehru was very open to it.
Right.
Now this is all gone.
Right.
She has nationalized banks, she has nationalized insurance, nationalized more or less the oil industry, nationalized coal mining.
Kicked out some foreign companies.
They left because the conditions that were given to these famous ones are IBM and Coca-Cola.
Right.
They decided to leave because they were not willing to stay under the conditions that were. Basically, they were asked to reduce their stake down to 40%, which means that their controlling stakes might go to somebody else, so they didn't want it. They left also. So in effect, by 1984, also, the public sector has greatly expanded.
Yes.
1981, I think, Francine Frankel gives these numbers that out of the 30 largest enterprises by the capital investment, 24 are in the public sector.
Wow.
And about 75% of the paid up share capital is in the public sector. So you can see, the public sector has really, by that time, expanded dramatically.
Right.
So what the legacy of Nehru clearly very strongly kind of continues, both of ideas and the actions.
Yeah.
So Indira Gandhi is then succeeded by Rajiv Gandhi, the son. Here comes a third opportunity, right? So the first one was when the 1969 struggle happened between Mrs. Gandhi and the syndicate. Second was Morarji Desai became prime minister. The third one comes with Rajiv. Now Rajiv genuinely wants to change things. I wouldn't call he's anti-socialist, but he certainly is not happy about what the socialism has delivered.
And not indoctrinated in the same way.
And he's not indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Because for his college studies, he was in UK. 1970, around that time, he came back to India and he had no interest whatsoever in politics, unlike his younger brothers, Sanjay Gandhi, who had joined Indira Gandhi and all. And, he came into politics only because Sanjay Gandhi died in this plane crash. So the Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the mother, wanted help, and Rajiv basically came with the idea of assisting the mother. But the circumstances really put him in a place where he suddenly becomes the prime minister.
Right.
And he, therefore, having been a pilot for 10 years, before that really in UK, so probably he saw things working better. UK may have indoctrinated us into socialism, but their own policies were certainly not the kind of socialism that we had. So he probably also saw things working a little better there, which was not practicing this planning and license permit Raj, etc., etc. No exchange control sort of thing and all. So he may have seen the workings of an alternative economic model, and within India, during the 10 years, he probably was on the receiving end of socialism, right? Because he was an ordinary citizen. So rather than seeing it from the viewpoint of the fellow who is behind the desk giving you the service, he is thinking of this from the viewpoint of the fellow who is on front in the front of the desk, where at the receiving end.
Right.
So I think and everything he says in the first year, tons of speeches from which I quote, he basically wants to shift to the market economy, and he in one speech goes to I think it was FICCI, because CIA was not yet a force. I think CIA begins to become a force in the early 90s. FICCI is the principal representative of the industry, and he tells them there that we are making changes very fast, and you will not be able to keep up with us. That's how fast we are going to move. And in the first year, the budget he presents, actually it's a very reformist budget. Nani Palki Wala and the other Jha, there's P. Jha. So Prem Shankar Jha, P.H. Jha, Prem Shankar Jha. They all, who are more kind of on the liberal side of this, they all hail the budget, that this is for the first time, and Palkiwala had been writing every budget he was writing a review and always complaining, But this one he really very much welcomes. And some of the reforms that are mooted by him in this budget do get implemented. But very soon, his capture by the senior Congress leaders begins. The May 1985, there is a AICC, All India Congress Committee convention in, I think, Mumbai. And they really give him a very hard time in the working committee. He wants the endorsement of the Congress Working Committee of what he was planning to do. He had proposed in the budget, and they extract a prize. They said, no, but we can't leave the path of socialism. That's that's our party's legacy and all. So he has to own socialism. And so in this final address he gives, prior to that, if you look at him, he hardly uses the word socialism in his speeches. But in that one, he defends socialism. Although, being young and flamboyant, he also redefines socialism. He said, this simply means that it doesn't mean that we suppress those who are creating wealth. It means bringing up the people who are down below. That's what socialism means to me. So it's sort of redefined, but he had to own. And by second year, basically, when the next budget gets presented.
And again, so the legacy in some sense reinforces itself.
So because you see, because whatever new people who join in are a tiny fraction of what already exists. There is a stock flow issue here. That every year the new crop that is coming in of political leadership or bureaucratic leadership or economists or whoever, they are being schooled into the thought by the existing stock of people, and the stock is very staunchly socialist. So they are converted into this socialism, and this process continues. This inheritance and legacy. sort of continues.
So in some ways, it's a miracle that Narasimha Rao did what he did.
Precisely,
Yeah.
precisely. So we come to that, So yeah, so Rahul, so Rajiv Gandhi, so ultimately, some trade reform, I think trade liberalization continued. I think that's not at a speed, but still, last half of 1980s.
Yeah.
You see some trade liberalization, and the exchange rate is also. We also got Governor Malhotra,
Right.
as a smart person. So he let the rupee depreciate actually, which helped a bit. So in the last 5 years, you see growth also accelerating a bit, and some piecemeal liberalization had happened, So, so that's the scene. But now politics also beginning to change. Why? Because Soviet Union collapses. China is now suddenly rising up. So for a long while, there was this argument that we would give that, Singapore or Hong Kong, they're city states, so how are they relevant to us? Then you come to then you come to South Korea, Taiwan. Yeah, but they are small countries. They are very, homogeneous, etc. We are a very large country, so it's not going to work. This whole outward-oriented, export-oriented model, that's not going to work for us because we are very large. And then China comes. China is more populous than India.
Yeah.
It was more into heavy industry than India. It was more socialist. Everything, all means of production in China were owned by the state.
It was poorer.
So it was poorer than India. And then it begins to rise, at 9-10%, well, all those arguments that were being made collapse. So there is finally some acceptance, and at least some of the more inside the government, people with liberal minds, and in particular, our common friend Rana Hassan's father, Dr. Abid Hussain. So there are some people inside the government who are liberal minded. Monte Carlo Alia was in there as well. Who else? I think he had left actually. Although Patel, IG Patel, but of course not only he had left, but he had been certainly Bimal Jalan. They were not liberalizers. They changed their minds afterwards.
Right.
They changed their minds afterwards. But some thinking begins with me. Rakesh Mohan was there, and Rakesh Mohan certainly was very liberal minded, and he was advising the Ministry of Industry, where he was actually rewriting the industrial policy.
Right.
That 1989 election happened where VP Singh came and Rajiv Gandhi lost. So VP Singh actually had drafted an industrial policy, which in my kind of reading went about 2/3 of the way to the 91 industrial policy, the famous one that which changed the course of the Indian economic model. But it went already, it had one provision, for example, that up to 250 million rupees worth of investment, no license would be required.
Right.
So that would have covered easily 70-80% of the investments in India at the time. So it was already, and he had actually announced it, but then couldn't implement it. His government fell.
Right.
And then Chandrasekhar kind of succeeded him, but he was a lame duck prime minister because there was no, there was really no majority on his side, and also therefore he was not going to last. He knew, but Rakesh Mohan says that he as prime minister, he kept the industry ministry, I think, with him also, and he would come and encourage them to that whatever I say publicly was all politics. You just keep working on this. I want this to happen and all.
Interesting.
So apparently he was also on board, it seems. So internally, I think there is now some, at least there are some economists and some bureaucrats also.
Right.
The industry secretary during Chandrasekhar's prime ministership was A.N. Verma.
Oh. Very interesting.
And E.N. Verma's secretaryship is when this industrial policy was being worked on by Rajiv, and I think he was also the industry secretary when VP Singh was. So he may well have been the author to some degree. Must have had something to do with it. Who later on becomes the principal secretary of Narasimha Rao.
Yes.
Because Narasimha Rao also knows that he is a reform-minded person, which is why he brings him up there. And so this is where we stand. Elections are called because Chandrasekhar doesn't have majority. And during the elections, of course, Rajiv Gandhi gets assassinated. And we then have Narasimha Rao, first they go to actually the then Vice President of India, I think Sharma, forgetting full name. So he says that I'm not in great enough health to actually carry on the duties of the Prime Minister. And so Natwar Singh, I think in his memoirs writes about it. I think that's where I saw or Natwar Singh and one of the other woman, very prominent Congress leader, also close to Sonia Gandhi actually. So they two go to Sharma first, and then they go to Narasimha Rao. Narasimha Rao, of course, was packing up, he was sending all his stuff to Hyderabad because he saw that, finally he was going to retire and all. Suddenly this change happens, and he's asked to become the president. Well, there's the opportunity that whoever becomes the president will likely also become the prime minister. This is exactly what happens. So now we come to Narasimha Rao, and the big, $1,000,000 question really is, why is he different? Why does he do it? So that is a very hard, very, very tough call. Exactly, how do we explain? Right? I'll tell you why. Immediate actions, you could say that, well, there was crisis, and World Bank and IMF are breathing on your neck, and therefore you had not much choice, etc. Right? You could make that argument. But that, of course, if that was the only force at work, then a year or 2 years later, the crisis was over. Foreign balance of payments condition was quite comfortable and all. At that point, we could have reversed matters. And we have not even fully liberalized, consumer goods were still subject to import licensing and all. Small scale industries reservation was still on.
Absolutely. I mean, that's just the India argument. We can stretch it across India. Lots of countries go into crisis and approach the IMF. They don't end up
liberalizing
reforms.
Exactly, because the liberalization is not owned by the country.
Yes.
There has to be at the top leadership level the ownership of liberalization.
So clearly there was.
And in this case, there was a clear ownership by P.V. Narasimha Rao, because he not only did not reverse, but he continued.
Yeah.
Financial liberalization happened, private entry into the telecom sector happened, private entry into aviation, civil aviation happened. So this was all during Narasimha Rao's, some disinvestment happened.
Right.
So this was all, these were all liberalizing movements. And they all happened under Narasimha Rao. So there is something to be explained. Now, why this is also hard to explain is that after all, he was only 2 or 3 years younger than Indira Gandhi. So he was a product of the Nehru kind of generation, more or less. He was not Nehru's age, but he was the first generation leader during Nehru's prime ministership. That's when he cut his teeth into politics. And then he had been chief minister of Andhra Pradesh, where he got sacked. He was made chief minister by Indira Gandhi because she wanted to get rid of Brahmanand Reddy, and then wasn't happy with Narasimha Rao, so she also got rid of him. And then he spent some time in Delhi,
Right. So not an illustrious career by any means, right?
But one thing is that he's very discreet. He never gives out his mind. And if he is asked on certain issues, then he gives good advice. So in a way, among the senior leaders who had worked with Indira Gandhi, only Narasimha Rao survives when Rajiv Gandhi becomes Prime Minister. Because Rajiv otherwise brings in a very younger caste, his own people, some pilot, even one, it's a very different caste. But Narasimha Rao is the continuity there. And Narasimha Rao apparently, I think according to the account of his biographer,
Vinay
Sitapati, he actually gives him the freedom to name what ministries you want. And he actually, Narasimha Rao, very wisely puts together education with a couple of other portfolios and calls it the HRD
Ministry.
Human Resource Development. And in that, he, very smart person, keeps labor out of it. He doesn't bring labor into it. And I think somewhere I see this explanation that he felt that labor ministry is interested only in the welfare of the workers who are already in employment. It's not interested in the, so he was interested more widely. So he keeps labor ministry out of HRD. But that's his decision. So one thing, he also did a lot of introspection always when he was not in the government, he was not active. He read widely, of course, tons of languages he knew. Even while kind of he was waiting for Indira Gandhi to make some decisions to appoint him to something, he started learning Spanish at JNU and all. So he was a man of letters, there is no doubt, and presumably he understood Nehru better than anybody else. One thing then I quote an interview that Shekhar Gupta had done on Walk the Talk. On that show, and Narasimha Rao says that, look, he says that tell me about this old Narasimha Rao trick of U-turn. So he says, no, there is no U-turn. He said, you got to understand that the ground on which you are standing is itself moving. And so you have to move with how the ground is turning is how, So he said, the world had changed, basically. What he is saying is that the world has changed. And Nehru was, and he said, when we say that Nehruvian economics or Nehruvian whatever, there is nothing Nehruvian or there is nothing Gandhian. These people were constantly evolving. They would change their minds, So it's not like, it's the same. Nehru of 1945 was not the Nehru of 1960. So he has that understanding that the fact that you're making changes doesn't mean that you're leaving Nehru socialism behind. So he certainly, everything that you see, he certainly has no intention of saying that I'm abandoning socialism.
Right.
That is not his approach at all. But he just says that the times have changed and that requires some action from us.
Right.
And later on, again in another of Jairam Ramesh's book, he says that apparently he was been very upset when Vajpayee was considering the privatization of Air India. He didn't endorse that. So that's,
Right.
So he's not abandoning in this sense socialism.
Right.
But he sees that he is not leaving Nehruvian legacy behind, but is simply making changes that Nehru would have probably also made. And at that time, it's very interesting op-ed by J.R.D. Tata, where he writes that, people that I salute the new industrial policy, and if Nehru had been alive, he would have been the first one to salute it. Because he says that, those who say that we are leaving Nehru's ideas behind don't understand Nehru. That Nehru would have himself changed his mind, given the
facts.
The kind of outcomes that we have achieved. So it's quite interesting, but that is roughly, how one has to explain. And he talks a lot about, this middle path. At Tirupati, he holds the AICC convention after quite a while, actually, and after that AICC convention, I think there that may have been the last AICC convention. I don't know if after that there was a real serious convention ever happened.
Interesting point.
But there he outlines his approach, says that it's a middle way.
Right.
And he says that, look, there is one extreme where the capitalism says, I mean, I'm paraphrasing him a little bit, but only a little. That here is capitalism says that, you leave it to the markets and individual actions of the people will lead to the collective welfare maximization. At the other extreme, we have the hardcore socialism or communism, which will say that, make the right decisions from the top, welfare really the keeper of it's the leadership, and, you
Right.
maximize the welfare at the top, and that will maximize the welfare of the individuals. He says the truth is in between. You need the individuals to work, but you also need the top lead, you also need this instrumental planning and whatnot, So you need to be in the middle.
Right.
And by his definition, then once you identify these two extremes, there is a lot of wide middle. So Nehru was also in the middle, and he was also in the middle.
Fair enough.
So in this sense,
A little bit like a Deng Xiaoping kind of.
Of course, and he was watching actually, so when Deng Xiaoping was making the changes.
Right.
And he actually, it seems, uses similar tactics. Again, this may have been there in Sitapati's biography. But, the way Narasimha Rao said that there is a continuity. If you read that budget speech that Finance Minister Manmohan Singh did, actually it says that, it's a continuity.
Right.
We are doing what Rajiv ji wanted to do, and Rajiv ji wanted to do what Nehru ji was doing, etc.
Right.
So it's a complete, it's a continuity. That was Deng Xiaoping. When he tried to convince his people, say, look, this is what I'm doing is what Mao, Chairman Mao would have done.
Very interesting.
So there is this parallel. So
and the legacy he did face pushback from.
Oh yes. Initially, when he actually for the industrial power. Very interesting anecdote. This only the Dr. Manmohan Singh told me himself.
Oh wow.
So the pushback was that nobody wanted him to devalue. And remember that the 91 package, one of the important ingredients in it was the devaluation of the rupee.
Right.
That was very critical. If you ask me, if there had not been a devaluation, then this liberalization would have failed very much.
Right.
That devaluation was very critical. And that was the main thing I regard as the contribution of Dr. Manmohan Singh at the time.
Right.
So Dr. Manmohan Singh told me that he went to the Prime Minister and said we ought to devalue the rupee. So the Prime Minister was not on board. But he was insistent. So he said, let's take it to the cabinet. He said, well, if you take it to the cabinet, then devaluation shall not happen. Because he knew that the cabinet will never endorse the idea.
Right.
So Manmohan Singh really, then there was something about taking it to the president, something in which I forget exactly what was the story there, whether they took the matter to the president or they did not. But basically, whoever, either the Prime Minister signed, I think the Prime Minister signed, so he got Narasimha Rao's signature. And he said, I still have that piece of paper with me. This is very much, he retired. This is after Prime Minister Modi is the Prime Minister, and he was, so when I was at Niti Aayog, I had gone to see him, or I was departing from Niti Aayog at that time. So he told me this story. It's not, the other story is well known about two-part devaluation.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he pushed it through, and then when it came, he said it's already done.
Second one was already done. Yeah, Narasimha Rao got a bit of cold feet, after the first one.
Yeah.
But by the time Dr. Manmohan Singh called, I think who was the governor at the time? I think governor was out of town or something. But
right.
RBI, so he was deputy governor,
right?
Who later did become the governor.
I.V. Subbarao.
No. He was also the chairman of the 12th Finance Commission.
Rangarajan.
So I think Rangarajan said, sir, I've already announced it. So that story is well known, but
Yes,
this one is
this
not
one is
well
not.
known at all. Actually, that because there were people around telling him that shouldn't devalue, because this again the legacy part, that 1966 devaluation
Right.
left such scars on the psyches of everybody that in our country devaluation doesn't work,
Right.
and don't do it.
Right.
But Manmohan Singh actually in this sense was very consistent, Dr. Manmohan Singh, because his PhD thesis at Oxford actually was about devaluation. He had advocated devaluation, and then he was very quiet during 1966 devaluation because it didn't work out. But it was there in his book. He
Right.
suggested that India ought to devalue and open up the exports and the export taxes, etc.
Right.
So he, in this sense, I think he understood the role of the exchange rate very well, and kudos to him that he actually persuaded, because without it, this liberalization couldn't have succeeded, in my view.
Absolutely. And sir, I mean, so Narasimha Rao in that sense was just remarkable that he both owned it, pushed it through, sustained it.
And you have to I mean, the way he defended, in the parliament, I quote very extensively from that speech, the speech he gave in the parliament is just masterly.
Right.
He shuts up everybody. Somebody says, you are allowing these washing machines to be produced, but for the 10,000 rupees or so it will cost to produce washing machine. If you put it in the bank, from the interest that you earn,
Right.
You can employ somebody
Right.
to wash the clothes, and that will give more employment, etc. So he said, he said, so you want our women to be washing clothes for the rest of their lives, is it? His child said that, don't you want to free up women from these painful tasks?
Right.
I mean, he didn't say it this way, but that's his implication,
Yeah,
So
of
he
course.
really, he really, the defense of the industrial policy he gives actually is beautiful. There are two occasions, but the one, which comes on, there's a discussion on the demand for grants.
Right.
In the parliament on the Ministry of Industry.
Mm-hmm.
That is where all these issues come in, and the critics come in and attack him left, right, center.
Yeah.
And then he at the end gives this speech
Yeah.
answering everybody, and it's a masterly speech. So the man has he was not an economist, nothing, but his arguments are absolutely solid. And he's speaking extempore, so it's not even like he's reading out or something. Somebody wrote it and.
So, I mean, amazing, and I think we continued to get lucky with Vajpayee, who then
of course, so that was, so this was, in a way, India had a lot of bad luck.
Yeah.
But finally, we also got some good luck.
Yes.
That everything came together. Now, Narasimha Rao would also not have done absent the crisis.
Yes.
And that he emphasized also in this interview with Shekhar Gupta.
Right.
He says that, look, there was nowhere to go.
Right.
What were you going to do? We had hit a wall.
Right.
And so we had to do something. So in this sense, he, by the way, also to his credit, to Narasimha Rao's credit, actually, if you see his first speech that he gave, which was even before he had appointed Manmohan Singh.
Right.
June 21, I think. And Manmohan Singh was appointed maybe June 22 or something, sequence is that he gave this speech before Manmohan Singh was appointed. And the basic thing, it's a very short speech.
Right.
800 words or something, but it basically says everything that, we've got this cobweb of regulations which need to be removed. We have to open to the foreign investment. So basic philosophy is laid out there, actually.
And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, and you've been one of the primary sort of documenters of the impact of this on poverty, on growth. So again, for people who are watching, can you just highlight how big the difference was? What happened 20 years?
Yeah, so growth began to shift already in the 1990s, but it was a bit of an up and down because, that East Asian crisis, currency crisis happened, from which we did get impacted, actually. So I think from 94 to 97, 98, somewhere there, this period, when growth almost hit 7%,
right.
Certainly very high 6 or close to 7% or almost 7%. then during Vajpayee years, to his credit, of course, in my book, he did the most reforms actually.
Yes.
When I was writing my book, India, the Emerging Giant,
Right.
I was astonished at the kinds of things that I kept coming. And in fact, some of the things I ended up discovering after
Right.
I had written that book. So even that book, the documentation I give is not complete. There are some important things that are left out because I didn't register those.
Right.
But he was clearly reform oriented. He talked about double-digit growth.
Yes.
And he clearly was not carrying this baggage of socialism.
Yes.
He had no reason to be a socialist, and that's the Congress's philosophy. He bang, one or the other, and including building of the infrastructure, which nobody had tried on the scale that he, for the first time,
eliminated the small-scale industry reservations.
He's also started dismantling the small-scale industry reservation. Yes. The telecom revolution that we subsequently unfolded was his doing. What he did was what gave that revolution.
Absolutely.
Although entry had been given to the private players in this, but without his telecom policy, of 1999, none of what we saw in the subsequent years could have happened.
That's right.
And ultimately, it is on the back of this explosion of mobile phones that we have been able to build up under Prime Minister Modi the whole digital infrastructure and all.
Right.
So that was a very critical piece, for which the credit goes to.
And with the growth, the poverty fell.
And of course, and the poverty, of course, So very interesting because in those days poverty. There was an NSS survey of 1999-2000, which showed a very large reduction in poverty.
Right.
And that really got the anti-reform forces very nervous.
Yes.
So they really pushed back that, look, there is some problems with this survey.
So
it turned out that, I was skeptical initially, but it turned out they were right actually. There was a design change that influenced the outcomes.
The reference period was changed.
The reference period changed and all. So there was this debate, but in the end, though, Angus Deaton kind of took an alternative source from the Employment and Employment Survey, where they also asked about expenditures. And using those, he said that ultimately poverty decline is real. Poverty decline is real. There's an early period, Then I also began to write actually, looking at some of these numbers. Particularly where I came in had to do with the other social groups. Because this view still continued to be aired that scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, they are not getting anything at all.
In Why Growth Matters, you documented.
And that's Why Growth Matters. That's where, So that's a bit, That's later.
And that poverty reduction was 350 million people, right?
Yeah. There's just astonishing, how you see this happening. Now, retrospectively, some poverty reduction in 1980s did happen. Right. That was because of the success of agriculture. Because a lot of the poor people are in rural areas.
Right.
And if you look carefully, some poverty reduction happened during that period. Right. Some people some scholars actually, Rohini Pandey attributes it to this bank branch expansion in rural areas. I don't think so. She's, missing the bigger point, which is that really it's the agricultural growth. That is the period during which there is a whole practically 10-year period during which for the first time, the average growth over that 10-year period is about 4%. And 4% growth in agriculture can go places because there's a large poor population there.
Sir, this has been a fascinating conversation for me. I really wanted to touch on how the legacy continues to persist today and what we can do about it, but I think given constraints of time.
But let me just complete that. This is very important. Actually, because and this is in the part 3 of the book, really fully developed.
Right.
But where I go about what we have talked about is largely the political legacy that continued. And then 2004 we had a comeback of the UPA. right?
That's right.
And that basically for 10 years no reforms happened.
Yes.
And clearly
they reversed some things and they made things worse.
and I say somewhere, I don't know whether in this book or not, but somewhere that Ms. Sonia Gandhi derived inspiration not from her husband Rajiv Gandhi,
Right.
but from Indira Gandhi.
Right.
She seems to have been much more influenced, but it may also be,
Absolutely.
the Italian origins, and also who knows where it came. But clearly, there was a setback, and particularly during UPA 2, you get a lot of socialist legislation also.
Right.
I mean, if you look at Right to Education Act, Land Acquisition Act,
Right.
retrospective taxation type of thing,
Right.
many things, So there was a setback. So this continues, politically. Then Prime Minister Modi comes in and things begin to change again. There's a political side,
Yes.
but then there is also the legacy in terms of the bureaucracy,
Yes.
right? There are always some enlightened bureaucrats, so we should not minimize the importance of that, because without some enlightened people within bureaucracy, things will not change.
Of course.
I mean, political leadership may do whatever it may want to do, but it needs the bureaucrats to actually move things.
That's right.
And so you need at least some people within the bureaucracy who are liberal-minded, and there were enough actually.
But your point is the institutional culture and legacy becomes very much pro-control and pro-socialism.
And that is where, so many layers of regulation.
Yeah.
So what has happened over time is that even as we have dismantled the license permit Raj, there are other set of regulations that have come in, and our regulation is multi-layered.
That's
so, there's so many hoops you have to cross before anything is allowed by the system to be done. So that has happened, and that is that legacy, a continuation of that legacy. But coming to, business people also, still, they carry on that legacy. The import substitution is what they go for.
Yes.
They are okay with the regulation as long as you give the subsidies to compensate for the cost of regulation.
Right.
And you hardly see any push from the industry, serious push from the industry for liberalization.
Right.
When trade negotiations happen, for example, our export interests are hardly present.
Right.
Whereas the import competing interests are very omnipresent to stop the liberalization from happening. So even the business culture, and coming to my tribe, the economists, or our tribe, the economists, it's a sad scene actually, because I talk about it in the book that, look, if you look in terms of the homegrown economists, they are rare. It's rare to find somebody who actually is an unqualified champion of markets.
Yeah.
They're all at the most qualified, late arrivals, and then you have to be consistent, etc. But in terms of serious advocacy of liberalization and markets, it's rare. And in terms of teaching in our institutions, it still continues through this reproduction of, each generation producing its clone as the next generation.
And to the extent that liberalization was moving them towards markets, now I think the West has moved so much to the left that again there is this counterbalancing force.
That's another story.
And,
I mean, it gives you another justification. You see,
exactly.
Just,
to stick on to these
It doesn't
things.
make them right, but it just gives them a justification.
Yeah. And so I think like one reason why I think this book is incredibly pertinent today is because all of these tendencies persist. The swing back to them is incredibly likely. So I think this book
and this is where there's a contrast here with China, right? So China's inheritance was the same, meaning that this was also a heavy industry oriented model, very controlled, more in the public sector than us. Everything was in the public sector and all, and yet because it's authoritarian, this is where I draw the difference between democracy and authoritarian. That in democracy you have to take people along.
Yes.
And democracy has, of the two projects that Nehru set out to do, one was of democracy and the other of economic development.
Right.
His democracy project was very successful, and but that also means that change in India has been a little slower.
Right.
But that's.
And I think on that note, sir, I think this book is a remarkable attempt to take the people along, educate them about what has been so that we don't have to repeat it in the future. Thank you so much for writing it, and thank you so much for talking to us.
My pleasure. Great
Thank you, sir.
conversing with you.